Hi, everybody. Bobby Ogilvy, project manager and professional coach. Today's question: how much does creativity and innovation actually matter to your organization, to your business? The reason actually say organization is because it doesn't have to be a for-profit business. Um, does it seem relevant to you? Is this part of how you generate competitive advantage? Are there areas are there gaps in your organization you need to fix, but you don't know how? So I wanted to, and this will be a bit less directed than some of my other videos, but I wanted to throw this out to you because as I've been looking at some of the different organizational literature, and it's dealing with not just how they operate, but the kind of ethos or culture about how they're thinking about things, it occurred to me that it might. So some of the other videos talk about holacracy or Lalou's colored organizations. What are the low level ones? Red, amber, and then the main ones we're dealing with are orange, green, and teal, right? So, implicit in that seems to be this kind of development thing, right? And wouldn't it be great if every organization was a teal organization? But I was rethinking some of that recently. Um, One is a kind of scaling issue to say, not just could you get it out to every organization, but like, does every organization need to be, super autonomous and self-managed to have a big evolving purpose and to be super efficient with how it's approaching its resources and its governance and its communications? Does it make sense that you would want certain organizations to be a lower organizational type? Like, do you want a university to be orange, and not green, or orange and not teal? Um, I want to throw that out to you guys. Um, on the small scale end of things, as I see it, the smaller the organization is, the more you want teal, because if you're starting from scratch, um, teal has both the kind of the good ethical, green values kind of heart, but it's so much more practical and not just like good process and operations, but it is so self-directed in terms of what it can allow. So there's an element of kind of self-growth or multifaceted growth that teal wants to allow, right? Um, and I guess I'm thinking about the kind of organizational premise of smaller nonprofits. So just FYI, so right now I live in Atlantic, Canada, and yeah, there's a lot of nonprofits here. When you actually, as much as they might have a certain name and a brand, some might have been around for decades, right? When you actually look at the sizes of them, the average one, I would say, I remember about a year and a half ago looking at all the incorporated nonprofits in the province, and average would be, say, 3 staff, 200K budget, right? And that doesn't seem very big, but then you start to think what you could do with that and say, okay, well, yeah, maybe you could do something, right? And do those people really need to become teal organizations? Or another question I asked before to Brian Robertson, who's the guy who founded Holacracy One and wrote the book on holacracy, is that Brian, is there a minimum amount of people you need for this? What's minimum viable holacracy? His answer was that you can't do it effectively in 3 people or less. You need more than 3 people, which is to say, this notion of creating this whole process around here's how your governance meetings go and here's how your ops meetings go and you have this constitution with 3 people that is so much implicitly baked into how you operate. It's probably not necessary. It's more added kind of administration than it is this kind of organizational boom, right? Um, and it leads me to think that, does that mean that? But again, I just said, the smaller your organization is, the more they want this stuff. So does that mean almost like your organization should just try to start as teally as possible, but may have to, I don't know, decline into a more of an orange or a green organization? I hate to say that word, but operationally might make sense. There was pushback too from an MBA colleague of mine, and he liked the engagement potential of things like holacracy, but he was really considering aspects of, okay, well, holacracy in his view seemed to be very bad at project management term, they would use monitoring, controlling processes. There didn't seem to be enough focus on accountability and results and who's in charge of things, and I think particularly he mentioned budgetary control. And of course, you could see someone coming from an orange perspective would totally look at teal and say that, right? But on another level, I thought of, if you have a 5 or 10,000 person organization, how hard would holacracy be to implement? Or back to this whole initial question of this, which is do you need creativity in your organization? Is creativity necessary in your organization? Maybe for a 10,000 person, you could say call center type organization, but some clear technical tasks where people do it and you don't want a lot of innovation. Maybe holacracy is the wrong answer, right? Maybe you're trying to cut out creativity. I'm thinking back to some of my creative economy and operations courses, and one important distinction is to say, listen, there's some repeated way you work. Are you trying to make divergent outcomes, which is, something new, something innovative, some new product, some new experience, some new whatever, or convergent outcomes? You want a set, standardized, highly repeatable, highly scalable process, right? And if the answer is the second, if you want this convergent, highly repeatable, very structured process, right? Maybe holacracy doesn't really fit what your organization wants, right? And I just thought I would throw that out there. I guess it's also me trying to grapple through what size organizations need what kind of medicine. We know in kind of the classic organizational design literature, organizations, and really as a function of size, go through 4 stages, and it's about them. First they're a startup, and can they figure out a business model, and then they're the small growing company, and then there's more medium and larger company, and then they're this established large company, and what are all the strengths and weaknesses that come with that. And then when Les McKeown talks about it, he talks about it 7 stages, which is the 4 stages and the 3 transitional points between each of the 3 stages, right? But Les also makes the point of saying, like, listen, it requires a culture and an org shift to go from one stage to the next. So if you don't want that, if you like the current culture you're in, don't get caught up in this big growth thing, I need to do it. And I think startups can fall more of a victim to that, right? Because their whole valuation and financing model is premised on high growth. So they need to not only early on be selling and pitching that story or idea, but their sales, their business model that they're using, and the results of that business model need to be supporting that ethic. And so at some point, if you, for whatever personal leadership or organizational reasons, don't want to grow, you could totally see how in the startup mindset, oh God, that's crazy, why don't you want to grow? Why don't you want to grow? But lack of, not growing might be the right answer, particularly if you think of one of the things holacracy first reminded me of is when you study different organizational structures and things, and there's a type of organization called the matrix organization, right? And a lot of consulting type firms are based on this. Why? So really matrix organizations are about more efficiently dividing, all your labor resources, all these professionals with all the different kind of projects or things they're working on, right? So that's where the term matrix comes in, because it's almost like projects by people. Is that, it's this matrix, right? It's a big grid. And it's trying to better get utilization out of them, right? And so in that way, and matrix becomes hard to scale because it becomes harder and harder to track who's doing what. But for a relatively stable, and it could be large, but generally I'd say it tends to be more medium and smaller firms. Matrix is a great way to handle it because you have this team of great professionals, these great experts, and whether it's internal work or external consulting, you're trying to get the most out of their labor, right? They've also probably bought into a certain culture, and so this notion of hiring someone who's a big organizational fit, you can see how that has a strong cultural tone to it. And so, if part of org growth means culture shift, and you've hired someone for culture A, and now you're telling them now you need to do culture B, well, there is change management stuff that could do that. But on another level, there's probably going to be a lot of people who are like, no, I want culture A. And, I know you're offering me culture B. That doesn't fit for me. Some people might say, yeah, culture B is good. I can do culture B. But a lot of people might be saying, or some people, I mean, statistically speaking, you go through big changes, you can expect to lose about a quarter of your staff. So in that sense, when Zappos is going through its big holacracy transition and it loses only about 15%, statistically speaking, that's actually quite good, right? Organizations normally lose more than that in such a big organization level shift. So I don't have any hard recommendations for you, but I do want you to consider, to what degree do I want or need creativity or innovation in my business? If you find yourself on this high growth fast track, I want you to stop and rethink, what's the culture I want, and particularly that I'm good at, and not necessarily get caught up in this this cycle, this viewpoint bubble internal thing about have to grow. There's another great article I found in the past month, and it used the term zebras as opposed to unicorns. So unicorns are these crazy high value startups, and it was trying to posit something they called a zebra, which were more about slower, sustainable growth. They could deal with black and white thinking, and they kind of weren't caught up in the magic of their own startup, runaway success or whatever that was. There's a bunch of other good things that zebras seem to supposedly do well or should do well. That's it. How much organization do you how much innovation do you really need in your organization? Where are the areas you need to innovate, or is your organization going well? As a business leader, I just want you to contemplate these things and see where you could make things better. I'm Bobby Ogilvy, project manager and professional coach.